Wonderful. Thank you all so much for being with us once again on this Georgia Climate Digest interview series for Drawdown, Georgia. We are glad to be back with more interviews of climate and sustainability leaders in the state. I am beyond honored and excited to bring you all our guest today. Iesha Baldwin is the sustainability coordinator at Spelman College. She's the first sustainability coordinator at the college. As many of you have probably heard me discuss before, I am a Spelman woman. I am a Spelman grad. Iesha is also. And so I'm excited to be here with my Spelman sister to talk more about sustainability at Spelman. Thank you so much, Iesha, for being with us today to talk with us more about Spelman's sustainability initiatives. I'm really excited to chat with you about it.
Thank you so much, Eriqah, for having me. And this is a great way to launch 2026. So I'm super excited about this interview.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Iesha, if you could introduce yourself first and foremost to our audience and tell us about kind of the work that you do generally at Spelman and where your purview falls at the college.
Yes, so I am Iesha, and as Eriqah mentioned, I'm the first sustainability coordinator at Spelman. So what that means for our institution is that we have allocated resources to accelerate sustainability on our campus. I work really closely with our facilities team and helping with building improvements, energy efficiency, water conservation, et cetera. And then there's the other side of sustainability that is really near and dear to my heart, and I know Eriqah's as well, is the community engagement side of sustainability. And that is the side where we are engaging across campus, within different departments, and with our alum and just people who are connected to Spelman in different ways. So that looks like events, that looks like conversations like this, and different programming that really makes more people within our community feel that they are a part of sustainability.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, when I was a student at Spelman, I graduated in 2010, and so the Sustainable Spelman initiatives were new-ish at that time. So I do remember them launching as I was becoming a student that was involved in environmental sustainability, both on the campus, but also in the Atlanta University Center in general. So if you could let us know, myself and our audience know, how did the Sustainable Spelman initiative begin at the college? And in that beginning, obviously there are going to be challenges. So like, what were the challenges that had to be overcome to make Sustainable Spelman a reality and make it a focus for the institution?
Yes, I was not there, but from what I hear, Dr. Beverly Tatum, she was the president at the time, and she was the president who really put the seed in the ground around sustainability being a concept that Spelman could grow. And with her being president, one of the convocations, she talked about sustainability and environmental awareness, and how every Spelman student, every Spelman staff, faculty has a place in sustainability. And that was her message of a choice to change the world. We all need to play a part in making our world more environmentally friendly. So she made that speech years ago. I believe that was around 2010, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And from there, they started the Sustainable Spelman Initiative. And over the years, we have had Sustainable Spelman interns and students and faculty and staff who have really put so much time and dedication into making sure that sustainability is on our campus. I'm not sure of the exact challenges that they had during that time with building Sustainable Spelman, but I will say, if you have the support of your president, then
right,
the president leading that charge is something that is incredibly powerful. I will say, over the years, some of the challenges that we have had is making people see themselves in sustainability. So what does sustainability look like within community engagement. What does it look like in the arts? What does it look like in computer science? So that's one of the challenges that we have had at Spelman. And so we're now at a time where we are moving that needle forward more and having more people across our campus really feel comfortable with being a part of Sustainable Spelman and not just seeing what Sustainable Spelman does.
Right, right. Yes, shout out to Art Frazier, who has been at Spelman for many, many years as the facilities director, and yes, was championing Sustainable Spelman long before in the very beginning when Dr. Tatum first started talking about it. And she did start talking about it while I was there between 2006 and 2010. So yes, and Dr. Tatum, this was a huge part of her platform, and she talked about it all the time. So tell us more about, so we talked about the past, tell us more about what Spelman is focusing on right now. Specifically in terms of the climate related work, what are the initiatives that Spelman is currently working on in the Sustainable Spelman Initiative?
Yeah, so we're at a point now where we're sort of able to focus on what the future of sustainability at Spelman looks like. And thankfully, we have had really great partners in helping us figure that out. There have been reports that I know UNCF worked on to visualize what HBCU leadership looks like in climate action. Building on all of that momentum, we are ready to see what could be done in the future for sustainability at Spelman. We've launched some really cool pilots within the past year. One is the Building Improvement Toolkit in partnership with Southface and Sustain Our Futures. And that is an amazing initiative that will help us as a campus do some building improvement, works around energy efficiency. But it also serves as a way to train our students in the built environment. What does a career in the built environment look like? What does a green career look like? So that's super exciting. And that's something that we had our launch party yesterday. And so this semester, we're really taking that on, having students walk around our buildings and seeing what improvements can be made, and then having them just learn more about energy efficiency, water conservation, storytelling. What does storytelling look like within sustainability? Because we all know that we need our storytellers, because a lot of us work with data that most people cannot digest or have the desire to digest, because who wants to look at numbers all day?
Right.
So that's one initiative, our Building Improvement Toolkit. And then we have some other initiatives that are like our food waste and composting initiative that has really been happening for the past, I believe that one was started in 2020, if not a little bit before then. With the food waste initiative, of course, we are reducing our food waste, but we're also composting the food waste that we cannot reduce for different reasons. And then just figuring out how to get students more involved in that initiative as well have been invisible to the eye of our students and our faculty because it sits in facilities. But having people more aware of what has been going on campus and within the community and our overall impact on the agriculture and the growing and the farmers and small gardeners within the state of Georgia and throughout the Southeast, because we're turning food waste into compost, and that compost is local compost. So organizations don't necessarily have to go out and get compost from God knows where. It's local, and it helps with the overall environment. With our food waste and composting initiative, we partner with, it has been a process, and a lot of that process has been invisible to our students and our overall community because it sits a lot within operations. But even our choice to partner with Bon Appetit for our food service provider, Like that
Okay.
was a choice that we made as an institution that has made it significantly easier to
Right.
reduce our food waste and to compost. They are a great partner. They also cater when we have events. So the food that's left over from the event, it gets taken to the compost bin afterwards. So those invisible processes that are already there that we don't see because they're doing the operational work, but they're a really great partner. And we have conversations on how can we improve our food waste at Spelman? How can we reduce our food waste at Spelman? And they are also spearheading those conversations as well. So when your ecosystem cares about food waste, when your ecosystem cares about climate action, when your ecosystem cares about making sure that this food doesn't go into the landfill and that it gets composted so that we can then take this compost and give it to local gardeners and farmers. That is a process that Spelman leadership has put time and effort into building.
Yeah.
And now we're at a stage where we're able to fully communicate that to our community and let them know this started years ago, but we're here. And from here, we can keep growing and keep building and getting people excited because we have made a lot of progress around sustainability and climate action. And again, now we're at a time where we can actually have a zero food waste event.
Yeah.
And within those events, have conversations about what the future of sustainability at Spelman looks like.
Yeah, I thank you for that answer. I remember when we first started having conversations with Spelman. So after I graduated, I started working in campus sustainability at a nonprofit. And I remember when we first started having conversations with Spelman about the operations side of sustainability. And Spelman switched food service providers in order to be more sustainable. I mean, that might have not been the only, I don't claim to know all the reasons why it was switched, but I do know that one of the attractive points of switching was that there may have been another provider that would have been more receptive to the sustainable food systems. And students were demanding not only healthier choices when it comes to healthier vegetarian choices or other choices or having vegan choices at all, but also we're wanting to know where is the food coming from and where is the food waste going to once we finish. Because when you're thinking about feeding, I do not claim to know the ins and outs of the operation sides of things at college, but Spelman is a small liberal arts institution. So I can only imagine what the bigger colleges are doing and universities are doing when it comes to that food waste, food service, sustainable food service. It is a dance. I'm really glad to hear that those systems are continuing because I remember those conversations over a decade ago. And really in the Atlanta University Center in general, when we were talking about what does sustainable food systems look like, what can our food service provider do and what can't they do? And so I do know that that was one of the attractive points of changing and going to a different service provider was, okay, the next service provider needs to be more receptive to that idea. And it was a new idea at the time too, like across the food service system, the service providers were just catching up themselves. All the service providers out there were just catching themselves on how they even do that. So when the students were coming to them saying, we want to do this, they were like, we haven't even figured out what something like that looks like. And I was having a conversation with someone recently about farm to table, and not only like, are we able to grow the food on campus in order to serve it? And what does that consist of? And if not, where does the food need to come from in order for it to be up to code? To think about health and safety and everything else. So thank you for highlighting that, because I can probably speak a little bit more to the history, just being present when all that was going down. And so to hear that it's flourishing now is really encouraging. And the Spelman students were very instrumental in demanding that happen on campus. And I think we're a great example to some of the other smaller colleges and smaller HBCUs, I'll say, that wanted to make that happen as well, and now have been able to. Spelman also was one of the first HBCUs with a climate action plan, and I've been out of that world for some time now. So, but I do remember when that was all the rage of a school having a climate action plan, and Spelman was one of the first HBCUs with a climate action plan. Could you talk a little bit about, or I guess just introduce our audience to what a climate action plan is, if they are not aware, and Spelman's climate action plan, and some of the other things. You talked a little bit about energy efficiency, and we talked about food systems at length, but also like solar, and then there's a whole retrofit thing when it comes to buildings. But if you could talk a little bit about the climate action plan at Spelman as well.
Yes, so our climate action plan, which was developed again during, I believe that was underneath Dr. Tatum's presidency. Mm-hmm. And so it was around 2011, 2012. And we are updating it hopefully this year, crossing our fingers with the support of South Face, WSP, Sustain Our Futures. We are working on updating it this year, which is really exciting. It's time. But a climate action plan is essentially a document that is created in order to show how an institution can reduce their carbon emissions and what does that look like? Because as we mentioned before, a lot of the biggest wins within carbon emissions is within the facility side, the built environment. There's a lot of emissions that are created due to the built environment, construction, et cetera, just operations in general. But all of that starts with behavior and with culture. And the reason why Spelman has had so many wins is, again, because our facilities director cares about sustainability.
Right.
Art Frazier, he cares about sustainability, and that's his mindset. So anytime we are talking about buildings or discussing what the cafeteria composting system looks like, it's not second thought, it's foundational.
Yeah,
so right, it's not an afterthought. So that it helps so much, because a lot of times we can spend a lot of time in trying to convince and lose out on sustainability progress due to that. Yeah. So with our climate action plan, it's laid out how we can, as an institution, reduce our carbon emissions, what type of classes we can potentially teach in order to train the next leaders of climate leadership, and some other things as well. So it goes into great detail about what it looks like for Spelman to reach our goal of climate neutrality.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, because I know that all those terms can get confusing if you're not deeply steeped in academia and in the facility side of academia. I know that there are people that have questions around that. So thank you so much for that. So let's take a little bit of a deeper dive into the sustainability initiatives around energy efficiency. So I'd love to talk and dig a little bit more into those pieces specifically, especially for our folks in academia that are thinking more about how their school is sustainable or is becoming more sustainable. I also want to hear more from you, as well as we're answering and thinking about these questions around the student engagement piece. I think that's super important. You talked about already how students get involved in the built environment piece. I know Spelman's done a ton of work on that, building retrofits, building new buildings, the Beverly Daniel Tatum suites, for example. I stayed in those suites. I was one of the first people in my room. I love the suites. And so, but those suites were built with the idea around energy efficiency. They were built LEED Gold, I believe, but they were built to that standard because of Dr. Tatum and her champion of sustainability issues. And all the buildings on campus from now on are built to a certain standard because of her leadership. So when Iesha says that art and the folks at Spelman, that it is not an afterthought, but it is foundational, she's absolutely right. It permeates everything when it comes to facilities, but it's also deeply steeped. And I know that Iesha can talk more about this if you reach out to them. It's also becoming more deeply steeped in the way that students approach campus with the new subjects that are implemented from an academic side. They did not have all of the environmental subjects and sustainability majors and minors when I was there. So folks are really lucky to have that opportunity now to really dig into those pieces. So I can talk about that all day, but I wanted to dig more into the energy efficient projects. And just to reiterate, the board of trustees, back when I was still working in the campus sustainability piece, I remember what a big deal it was that Spelman's board of trustees passed a resolution to build and retrofit all buildings from then forward to LEED gold standard, if I'm not mistaken. And that was a big deal. That was a big deal for a small liberal arts college. That was a big deal for a college in the South. That was a big deal for HBCUs. Mm-hmm. And so when that passed, it was something that I think there was like articles written about it. I mean, it was a very big deal. And so when talking about the retrofit piece, how are you all deciding which buildings are going to retrofit? And if there are any metrics that you know of or screening tools that you're using, if you could tell us a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, so I love the history that you just gave for one. And I also want to add one more thing around so it's a mindset piece and the teamwork aspect of all of this with energy efficiency and art. I keep bringing Art up because he's like the man when it comes to all of this. He
really is
the piece. And so, but what he loves to say is that the building is just part of it. How we build is just part of it. How we live and operate within these buildings, that's the other half. And if we're not living to a certain standard, then it defeats the purpose. Yeah. So when we talk about, like, I grew up as a student athlete. So I use those references when I talk about teamwork and what it actually takes to win. So for Spelman to win in that space of having our buildings operate efficiently in reduced ways, be energy efficient and conserve water, it takes everyone who steps into that building, who lives, who has a meeting in that building, who does anything in that building to have that mindset of, you know, when I leave, I'm going to turn off the lights. So, and we all have heard that from our grandparents, like, you better make sure that you turn off the lights. Right. Don't be wasting my energy. So that's a mindset that I think that we're not necessarily bad at, but we can improve at our institution. We all can in general as Americans. I feel like we definitely take energy for granted. Yeah. And so we definitely can improve on that. But that starts with having more so of a teamwork mindset around it takes a team to make sure that this building is energy efficient. Because we can only do so much. We can put in the LED lights, but we're not living in those buildings. So we need the students, the staff, the faculty who live and work in those buildings to also think that way. And a lot of them do. So we're sort of, I want to put that piece in there.
And quite a few of those retrofits have been dorms, which is a completely different conversation when it comes to retrofits and metrics. Dorms versus academic buildings are two different conversations. Right. So to your point, Iesha, about like, are you living in the buildings? Are you just there for class? Those are two different conversations around retrofits and like leading to like, again, the question around how are you all deciding which buildings to retrofit and what screening tools are you using? Because I can imagine that retrofitting a dorm versus retrofitting the science center, for example, could have two very different conversations.
Exactly. And so because we are a higher ed institution, but we're here to serve our students and we want them to have the best experience. So we know because we graduated from Spelman that the dorm conversation is important to students. And so I believe that our leadership tries to prioritize that and making sure that students have better living environments.
Right.
So that's important to our leadership, and it's important to us as well. So that I believe that it gets prioritized that way. And then from the assessments, we have really good partners who do the assessments and bring that information back to our team so that we can decide how we can best move forward.
Great. So you talked about the right partners. You talked about working with Southface. We've interviewed Southface on this show, and many entities have utilized Southface audits. I don't know if that's what Spelman is using, but anything else you want to say about the energy assessment or audit that you all are running and what organizations are performing those? Is it Southface, or is there another organization that you all are utilizing to run the assessments when it comes to the retrofit piece?
Yeah, so we went through a long process of finding partners for energy assessments, and I know that Siemens is one, and then Walker Miller is another one.
Got it. Great. So what I'm really interested in is the challenges and the peaks and valleys of this retrofit conversation, the conversation around energy efficiency. What would you tell other campuses that are a similar size as Spelman or have similar profiles, mistakes or surprises that you wish you had anticipated? What would you tell other campuses when it comes to the built environment piece at Spelman that might help them in their retrofit journey?
Yeah, so I know that one of the things that we try to do as an institution is making sure that when we have capital projects, like projects that are just, we're doing this, we're doing a big one, we include the energy efficiency piece within that. And we try to stay away from smaller projects. And there's several reasons for that. One is that in terms of just overall organization and making sure that we know the building is going to still be there, 20 years, 50 years from now.
Absolutely.
You don't want to do a project and then next year they just decide, we're going to do a new building, or we're going in this direction. I would say that making sure that just working closely with facilities, if you are in a sustainability office, work very closely with your facilities and communicating with your facilities and just being a part of that team that does capital projects so that you can ensure that your energy efficiency project has a long life cycle.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And that's very helpful when we're talking about, again, buildings is a totally different animal because you have to have a conversation around, is it a dorm or academic building? So how is it being utilized? Dorms are obviously more utilized because people are living in them all day long, 24 hours a day for like 9 months, depending on your school year. Whereas academic buildings, they can somewhat shut down at a certain hour or use less energy at a certain hour based on what time of day it is. And so I know that there's been like some motion sensors and other things that have been implemented, not just at Spelman, but at other institutions to reduce energy so that you don't have all the lights on all night in a building that's definitely not being utilized all night. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about food waste, because that is also something that touches people every day, all day long, specifically at specific hours when they're, whether we're serving meals or if we're dealing with like a standing food situation of like snacks or other things that schools might have available all day long. So do you know how you all first quantified, or how did you first quantify food waste in the dining situation and dining operations? And what tools or methods have you all used to measure the food waste piece to know really not only how much was being wasted, but now how much is being saved?
Yeah, so that that history of when we had our other food service provider who cared less about food waste. I'm not sure if we did measure it during that time. And if so, we weren't using Compost Now, which is our beloved partner in our food waste initiative, Zero Food Waste Initiative, because they are a really good partner in helping us turn our food waste into compost. And without them at the moment, we wouldn't be able to do so. We have a really great food service provider, Bon Appetit, who, because it's a part of their values as a company to do food reduction and being just mindful of that, because of that, they also train their staff on how to compost. So that's something that they do. And without those partnerships, it will be very difficult to do composting and reducing our food waste. That partnership with Compost Now, I do believe that it started in around 2020, 2021. And because we have partners who care deeply about food waste and composting, they have tools to measure that. No, Bon Appetit, they have a tool to measure food waste. So we receive reports around food waste per month. And then for composting, it's the same thing with our Compost Now partners. They measure the amount of food waste that they receive from our institution, and then the amount of compost that they created from that food waste. So and they have their own methods and ways of doing that measurement or coming up with those calculations, but that's because of their leadership and caring about sustainability and climate action, we're able to make that happen as an institution.
Wonderful. Great. We've had Bon Appetit for some time now. So I remember when it changed over from the former food systems process. So you may or may not be privy to kind of this question, but wanting to know what operational changes in dining, whether that be menu planning, portion sizes, trayless dining. I think I remember when the trays were taken away. I think that was back in the day when that happened. Are you aware of which practices or what kind of changes in the system when you're dealing with serving that helped with the reduction of maybe water conservation too, if we're talking about trays and dishes, but also with food waste? Is there anything you want to talk about that you can speak to when it comes to what practices and operational changes happened that has kicked back the most in reduction of plate and kitchen waste?
Yes, so Spelman students have, for years, they've cared about food waste. And because of that, they have advocated for different initiatives to be put in within the institution. So I know like one of them was the trayless, the trayless. And I know Maya, who now works at Spelman in our events, she was a part of that change. And so over the years, like the progress has been made. A couple of years ago, Spelman students advocated for takeout trays so they can take their food to their dorms and not put it in. So reusable takeout trays. So that's another way that it's not necessarily reducing food waste, but is just being mindful about the way that we're operating within our cafeteria and reducing the amount of disposable plates that we use. That's, and that plays a role in the overall environmental sustainability thinking within our institution. And Spelman's students, I know that they have been asking a lot about our composting and food waste. They definitely want to see it more. And by see, I mean, have it be communicated better so that they are aware of what's going on. So we're launching that comms initiative this
Wonderful.
semester. And so that we should see some really interesting behavioral changes too because of that. And just seeing like, what else do students want to see since we're doing composting? Like, what other ideas are out there around food waste reduction? And then because our campus food service provider, Bon Appetit, they do think in terms of waste reduction, I know that they try to be mindful of that as well when they're serving.
So you talked about, I was going to ask you about the student piece, like how is it being communicated to students, what the savings are. So it's great that you all are launching the initiative to be more forward facing about that. So who is handling the compost side of things and how did it get started? Because obviously you have Bon Appetit, who is the food service provider, and then you have Compost Now, who is your partner in getting the compost where it needs to be. So how does that partnership work? I think our audience would be interested in that order of operations, if you will.
Right. And again, that's why I would say that sustainability it's a team sport, because without our campus partners, we would not be able to compost or reduce our food waste at the rate in which we are. Right. So what that looks like is our Spelman team, our facilities, our operations team we have put our money where our mouth is and have said, we care about food waste. We want to reduce our food waste. Let's get composting bins. Right? We've also thought really hard about what that composting looks like at Spelman, because we visited some institutions where they have composting bins all throughout campus, but it doesn't necessarily, sometimes it doesn't work as efficiently if you do it that way, because then you have high contamination rates. Right. So our team has thought really hard about how can we ensure that we are actually composting? How can we ensure that we have low contamination rates, that we are training particular people to make sure that they have a mindset around food waste reduction and composting? And so because our food service provider is Bon Appetit, and they care also about environmental sustainability and food waste, we gave them compost bins so they're able to compost in the back end of the cafeteria. So that's where our composting bins live. They live in the back, which is one of the reasons why people ask, why aren't we composting? It's not that we're not composting. It's handled on the invisible side of campus.
Got it.
And because of that, we have really low contamination rates. And pretty much everything we put into every bin that Compost Now picks up from Spelman will be able to be turned into compost because the contamination rate is so low. That's a process that was created by a really good team of people who knew a lot about logistics, but who also cared about composting. Because we're not at a time, unfortunately, we're not at a time within our state of Georgia where composting makes sense economically. So it's an investment in the future of what this could look like, right? And how we're all in this together. We're on the same team. We're trying to build something that makes sense for the long term, because we can't just keep putting food in the landfill. One, because landfills are filling up, and two, because at the end of the day, that is a resource. It's an actual resource that we're just throwing in the trash can. Food waste gets, as you all know, like food waste gets turned into compost. It can get turned into a nutrient that growers are able to use, and then it could also be turned into other things like energy.
Right. So there are Compost Now bins that Bon Appetit is using. So does Compost Now come and collect it? Is that compost utilized on campus, or do you know? I'm just curious about the specifics of where that compost is utilized and how that's been processed beyond Spelman's campus.
So the way that it works is that Spelman has compost now bins that sit in the back end of our cafeteria with our food service provider, Bon Appetit. Right. Compost Now comes to pick those up once a week, and then they turn that food waste into compost.
Got it.
So that is an entire process that happens every single day. It's happening right now. Students are eating. The cafeteria staff are then we have a conveyor belt. When they put their food on the conveyor belt, the staff then take that food and dump it into the composting bin. And then from there, Compost Now comes and picks it up once a week. So that's what that process looks like. And it involves a lot of different people. There's a lot of moving parts. And at the moment, we've seen that it does benefit because we created over 30,000 pounds of compost since 2021. So, and we are very grateful to be able to do that in partnership with Compost Now and Bon Appetit.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for kind of downloading us on both of those pieces, both the retrofit piece, built environment piece, and the food, because for campuses, those are two very, very important pieces to consider when you're thinking about sustainable practices. So now let's talk a little bit about kind of your job in a macro space. What you've been on the job, I think, a few years now. Like, what do you think is some of the best advice you have for the sustainability managers or coordinators at smaller institutions that are less resourced, trying to implement similar programs? So if they're just starting out, where should they start? How should they start? And how would you recommend that they prioritize this work?
Yeah, so I've been at Spelman for 2 years now, and I would say it's really important. So when I came into Spelman, and it's a little bit different for me because I graduated from Spelman as well.
Sure.
So I had an understanding of some of just the cultural aspects. And at the end of the day, the sustainability movement is a cultural movement. It's a culture change. And I also sort of didn't want to bring anything new to people because people already have a lot on their plate. They're not trying to do new initiatives. It's just a lot. And the piece that I really wanted to make sure that happened was the question that I asked myself was, how can we make people feel that they have a place within sustainability on campus? So, because you can build a beautiful sustainability team, but if that team isn't integrated within the culture of the institution, it doesn't matter if you have one person or if you have 10 people. If they aren't integrated within the institution, then it's pointless. So just trying to figure out what people are working on within your institution and how you can tie sustainability to their already existing projects. So that was the mindset. That's still the mindset. Thankfully, Spelman has been open to some other smaller initiatives that I have put out there. And one being the Student Sustainability Fund, which is a small pool of money. And with that funding, students are able to pursue ideas related to at the intersection of sustainability and innovation. So that also shows people that sustainability isn't just environmental sustainability. It's not just how do we reduce waste, but it's also how do we use technology to do these things? What does the next innovation look like so that we can ensure that we are able to compost in a better way so that those processes are a lot more affordable to the everyday person and to institutions. Like, this is something that's innovation. So we have our students who, there's one student in particular student team, because it takes a team. So the student teams are working on different initiatives. One in particular was a food waste management app. And then another one was an energy project. So we have students who care deeply about sustainability, and now they're building some technology around it to solve some of those issues. But luckily, like, just trying to get buy-in, but buy-in just comes with not only deep trust, because it does take trust, but also just knowing that people already have projects. And so it's deep trust, but also deep curiosity to know what people are working on and how you can be involved in their already existing projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can tell you all, for our audience, when Iesha talks about a whole campus integration, that is not hyperbole, and that is not an exaggeration, or cannot be minimized. When I worked in campus sustainability for 6 or 7 years, I saw the effects of schools that had one professor that was interested in sustainability. Schools in Georgia, I won't name names, but schools in Georgia who had like one professor that was interested in sustainability and thought that the campus should switch over to that. And the uphill climb that it took to get those campuses to be interested in this and to see it as a priority and to get anything done there, because they spent most of their time trying to convince the office of the president, the faculty, and facilities, spent all their time trying to convince them that this was important. And so nothing or not as much was getting done because of this one professor that was interested in it. And also, I think, to your point, Iesha, about where it could fall, like facilities, it kind of falls under facilities, if I'm not mistaken, at Spelman. But in some other schools, the sustainability office falls under student services. At some other schools, so you get different priorities based on where the sustainability office or the sustainability team or the sustainability person is housed. If they are in the facilities department, then the priorities can be different. Although I think Art does a good job of weighing that it's not just important for facilities, but it's also important for students. And
absolutely. And we had a really great framework at Spelman because of just how it started, that seed that was planted years ago. And Sustainable Spelman, our campus-wide sustainability initiative, although I'm the first person to actually manage it, like that's my job. Right. It wasn't necessarily Art's job to manage that, because he's the director of facilities. So Art and Dr. Shafi, they probably were only able to dedicate, 10% of their time to that, because they have so many other things. But the beauty of this is that we as an institution laid the groundwork years ago with Dr. Tatum, and Art has been constantly moving us forward as an institution. So we have a really strong foundation. And a part of that was the development of the Sustainable Spelman Committee. So that's another recommendation that I would have for other institutions. If you do not already have a committee of people who are dedicated to sustainability on your campus, then create that. We have one, and it's existed for quite some time and is composed of people from across campus. We have people from the arts, people from the sciences, and then we also have alum who are a part of that as well. So it's a great way to just keep moving the needle forward. So that's another way. And try to make it fun, not just meetings, but like community building. Have lunch with your team.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Iesha, for all of this information. I just appreciate you and having a connection to you to ask those questions, as not only as an alumna, but also as somebody who just sees the importance of sustainability on campus and sees the importance of the environment and climate being important to our academic institutions and our institutions of higher learning. I'm going to ask you the last question, which is my favorite question that we ask all of our leads on the series, and that is, what is giving you hope around climate in Georgia?
That's such a good one. Well, for one, conversations like this, the fact that Drawdown Georgia exists, that ecosystem is there, and resources are being allocated towards energy efficiency projects, towards food waste projects. So that's something that gives me hope, is that it's not a theory. It's not something that we would just think about and hope that can happen, but it's something that if you have an idea, you can apply it. And that just doesn't exist in a lot of places.
Right.
So that is something that gives me hope. I'm very aware that there are so many people across the ecosystem who are putting their time and their energy into making sure that we're able to keep moving the needle forward as an ecosystem that does take a team.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that team is of Spelman people, but also is of our other partners like South Face and Compost Now and the city of Atlanta. Like, there's so many institutions that help us move the needle forward at Spelman.
Wonderful. Thank you so much once again for coming to talk to us about Spelman's initiatives. I could talk about Spelman all day long in so many different varying capacities for obvious reasons, but I just really appreciate you coming in. Congratulations once again on being, Spelman's first person that this is your whole job. So you're dedicated to doing every day. And thank you for the service that you're providing to our alma mater. I think it's really important. And I appreciate you for taking up that mantle and having your finger on the pulse of what's going on around campus when it comes to sustainability. So thank you again for that. And thank you for being here. Thank you all for joining us once again for this Georgia Climate Series from Drawdown Georgia. And we will see you next time.